A hand reaches toward a fire, not to warm itself, not to signal danger, not out of fear. It reaches toward the flame holding something dead. For a moment, it hesitates, an old instinct, buried deep in the nervous system, telling it that fire destroys, that fire is the enemy of flesh. And then, slowly, the hand pushes forward anyway. That single motion, small, almost forgettable, may be one of the most consequential gestures in the history of life on Earth. Because somewhere, at some unrecorded moment, an ancestor of ours did something no animal on this planet had ever done before. It changed its food before eating it, and nothing was ever the same again. Most people assume cooking was simply convenient, a discovery of comfort. Fire existed, meat existed, and eventually someone put the two together because charred meat tasted better than raw meat. That is not what happened. The truth is stranger, older, and far more unsettling than convenience. Because cooking did not just change what we ate, it changed what we are. To understand this, you have to go back, not centuries, not millennia, but nearly 2 million years, to a landscape almost unrecognizable as Earth. Grasslands stretch in every direction. The air smells of dust and dry grass. A group of hominins moves in the heat, small-brained, thin-limbed, vulnerable in almost every way that matters. They are not the strongest predators here. They are not the fastest. Their teeth are unimpressive. Their claws do not exist. And yet, according to the fossil record, something begins to happen to their bodies that should not have been possible without a hidden variable. Their brains begin to grow rapidly, disproportionately, almost recklessly from an evolutionary standpoint. Because brain tissue is expensive. It consumes roughly 20% of the human body's total energy, despite being a fraction of its mass. No animal simply decides to grow a brain like that. Evolution does not hand out free upgrades. Something had to pay for it. And for decades, scientists searched for the invoice. In 1999, a primatologist named Richard Wrangham proposed something that unsettled the field of human evolution. He suggested that the true engine behind our evolutionary transformation was not meat. It was fire. Specifically, cooked food. His argument was almost uncomfortably simple. Raw food is expensive to digest. Chewing it, breaking it down, extracting its energy. All of this costs the body enormous amounts of time and energy. Chimpanzees, our closest living relatives, spend nearly half of their waking hours chewing raw food just to survive. Half of their lives. Now imagine removing that burden. Imagine a species that could take a piece of meat, break down its proteins before eating it, denature the fibers, kill the pathogens, and suddenly extract far more calories in far less time, with far less physical cost. That species would have a surplus. And a biological surplus over enough time does not just get spent, it gets invested. The body began making a trade most people never think about: intestines for intellect. Human guts are strikingly small compared to other primates of similar size. Our digestive tracts are short, efficient, almost minimalist, because cooked food requires less mechanical and chemical breakdown. But smaller guts freed up metabolic energy, and that energy went somewhere. It went into the only organ hungry enough to use it: the brain. This is the moment where the story stops being about food and starts becoming something far larger. Because if this hypothesis is correct, the very organ you are using right now, the one generating the curiosity you feel reading this sentence, may exist because an ancestor of yours once held something dead over a flame. But here is where the story fractures. Because if cooking is truly responsible for the explosive brain growth we see in Homo erectus nearly 1.8 million years ago, then evidence of controlled fire should appear at the same time. It doesn't. Not clearly, not consistently. The oldest widely accepted evidence of habitual controlled fire comes from sites like Wonderwork Cave in South Africa, dated to around 1 million years ago. And even that evidence is debated, layered in academic caution. Wrangham's hypothesis needs fire nearly 1 million years earlier than most archaeologists are willing to confirm. So either the evidence hasn't been found yet, buried beneath sediment and time, or the timeline itself is wrong, or something even stranger is true, that cooking, or something functionally similar to it, existed in forms invisible to fossilization long before formal hearths appear in the archaeological record. This is not a settled science. This is an active argument, playing out in journals and conferences right now, between researchers who agree on almost everything, except the one detail that would change how we understand ourselves. And that uncertainty should unsettle you more than a clean answer ever could, because it means one of the most defining transformations in the history of our species, the moment our ancestors began radically reshaping their own biology, might have happened quietly, undocumented, unwitnessed by anyone who could explain it. There was no ceremony, no decision, no single genius ancestor who invented cooking the way a modern mind invents a machine. There was likely only repetition, trial, accident, a piece of meat left too close to a wildfire's edge, an animal caught in a burning grassland, its flesh unintentionally transformed by heat before a hungry hominin ever touched it. Evolution does not require intention. It only requires advantage. And once an accidental advantage appears, even once, biology begins, slowly, mercilessly, to select for whoever can repeat it. Now, the scale of this story begins to widen, because cooking did not only reshape the brain and the gut, it reshaped behavior, and behavior is where biology becomes something closer to society. A raw carcass, torn apart in the wild, invites competition, aggression, immediate consumption, because there is no reason to wait and every reason to eat before a rival takes it. But fire changes the rhythm of eating entirely. Cooking takes time. It requires waiting. It requires a controlled space, a hearth, a fixed point in the landscape that others can gather around instead of scatter away from. For the first time, perhaps, eating stopped being a solitary act of survival. It became something communal, something shared. Some researchers argue this is where the earliest scaffolding of human social bonding begins. Not in language, not in tools, but in the simple, radical act of multiple individuals sitting still, together, around the same flame, waiting for the same meal. If true, the campfire is not a symbol of human connection. It is the origin of it. And this is where the story stops being about ancient humans at all. Because if cooking rewired our digestion, and our digestion rewired our brains, and our brains rewired our behavior, and our behavior rewired our societies, then the trajectory that led to language, to culture, to cities, to art, to the very device you're using to watch this right now, did not begin with an idea. It began with heat. It began with the willingness to do something no other animal on Earth was doing, to deliberately alter the natural state of something before consuming it. That single behavior, transforming the world before absorbing it, may be the earliest fingerprint of human intelligence itself. Not the wheel, not writing, not even language. Fire, applied to flesh, by a creature that did not yet know what it was becoming. There is something quietly disturbing in that thought, because it means the foundation of human identity, our intellect, our culture, our sense of being different from every other creature on this planet, may not have originated from a moment of brilliance. It may have originated from hunger, from scarcity, from the raw, indifferent pressure of survival, acting on a small-brained primate who had no idea it was standing at the edge of a transformation that would eventually produce philosophy, science, art, and self-awareness. We like to believe our intelligence was earned, chosen, the product of some upward reach toward greatness. But the evidence suggests something colder, It suggests that we became who we are almost by accident, through a behavior so small, so mundane, that the creature performing it could never have understood its consequences. And perhaps that is the real weight of this story. Every fire you have ever sat beside, every meal you have ever shared with another person, every quiet moment of connection formed over food carries, somewhere beneath it, the ghost of that first hesitant hand, reaching toward a flame it did not yet trust. We are, in a very real sense, still living inside that decision, still shaped by it, still eating because of it, still gathering because of it, still thinking because of it. The next time you see a flame, in a kitchen, in a candle, in the dying light of a fire pit at night, consider this. You are not looking at a tool. You are looking at the reason you are capable of wondering what you are looking at.